Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for this workshop, which we hope will kickstart a series that we have planned from the TTK Center for Rehabilitation Research and Device Development, R2D2. And it is my absolute pleasure to welcome Professor P.V. Madhusudan Rao today to kickstart this series. Professor Rao is head of the Department of Design at IIT Delhi and is also professor in both the departments of mechanical engineering and design. Many of you may know him from his work in assistive technologies, design of the smart cane, which is quite famous now all over the world. He is co-founder of the Assistech lab that developed the smart cane in the Khosla Institute of Khosla School of Information Technology. And they work mainly in the development of assistive devices for vision impairments. He is also coordinator of the IIT Delhi Design Innovation Center. He's passionate about user-centric design, inclusive design, universal design. And he is responsible for initiating and driving multiple programs in design, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So today he'll be joined by Dr. Richa Gupta, who's just finished her PhD at IIT Delhi in design, as well as Ms. Aanchal Sharma, who is working towards the light at the end of the tunnel for her PhD. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you all here. Thank you for joining us, and we are looking forward to a very enlightening workshop today. Over to you, Professor Rao.
Okay, so good afternoon, and thanks for this opportunity. We are extremely delighted to be at IIT Madras virtually, and particularly with R2D2 lab, which is also one of the I would say, a role models for the country in many ways for students and faculty to emulate. Okay, so what probably we are going to do is to basically see that this particular session also becomes in some way interactive rather than purely one way. So anything which you want to actually please put it in the chat window. I should be able to gather, or my colleagues Richa or Aanchal can also look at and address some of those things which comes in the chat window, so that it also becomes a very interactive session. So let me start sharing my slides. It's a blank screen, which is there. So thanks for this opportunity again. So what we'll do is we will just start with a small problem statement. And I want you to spend maybe about 5 minutes thinking about this problem statement, and also what could be a possible solution which you think is for this problem statement. So let me put the problem statement so that whatever solutions you come up will also form a basis for a lot of discussions, and how does design thinking work in many ways. And this is a problem which is posed by a couple of hospitals in Delhi. In fact, this is also an open problem which people have still not addressed. So there are opportunities if somebody wants to take it up. A lot of physicians and physiotherapists came to us and said that they prescribe certain exercises to their patients, particularly when somebody is leaving a hospital after few days of stay. They're asked to do certain exercises, and those exercises are very important for complete recovery, or for let's say not occurring the same problem again. And usually what happens is people don't stick to these exercise schedule which is given, and when usually doctors or physicians ask them, they usually lie. saying that we did exercise, whereas they haven't done. I'm not saying about all of them, but some of them. So what physicians said is, is there a way, some way we can know that whether the patient has actually done the exercises or not? Can even technology solve this particular problem is one aspect. And similar problem also came from All India Institute of Medical Sciences. They have a huge yoga center. They're also using yoga to cure certain diseases. And they said how we are actually running a big research program where people are prescribed certain exercises, and we are basically looking at how the yoga can be used to cure certain diseases. But unless people come and really tell the truth, our research cannot proceed, whether they have really done those exercises or not. So in a way, these two problems are similar. Now, I'll just probably start now and give you 5 minutes. After 5 minutes, we'll come back, and I want to look at what are the solutions. So when you are ready with solution, please put it on a chat window so that others can also see, or at least we can read out some of the solutions when we take it up. So let's start with this exercise. Please, I think your time has already started. So thanks for very interesting solutions which have come up. And so when I look at some of these solutions, they are in 3 categories majorly. So one type of solutions basically says that you have some kind of a camera and a video recording of the exercises which are done. So that's basically a camera based solution. The second, which has been suggested, is a wearable based solution, where you have some kind of a wearable on the body of the person who has to do exercises, or they do it on a specific equipment which can also record whether exercises have been done, is the second. And third, which probably has come from one, which is also very interesting, is that can you do the gamification, in the sense you actually make them play a game, and once they are engrossed in a game, the kind of the physical movements which game requires is also leads to the completion of exercises, kind of a thing. So very interesting, and I think I was also expecting similar solutions. Okay, now what generally happens is, let me go back to the slides. So whenever we are given a problem such as this, and I'll also come to Sujata's comment, probably that is also a foundation for a design thinking, which is there. So usually we come up with some solution, and often, because we are also trained in this, if we look at a lot of education, particularly engineering education, the teacher actually gives a problem and you are supposed to come up with an answer or a solution. And usually one who comes up probably in a shortest possible time is also appreciated, which is very common in our system. So often when we say this is a solution, I would say this is more of an answer rather than a solution. Solution, probably to be called it as a solution, it needs to qualify certain more things. So we had multiple answers to the problems which are given to the problem. Okay. Now, what generally happens is whenever we are given a particular problem, I think we are also trained to immediately jump onto solution without doing much research on the problem itself. And in this context, a quote which once Einstein said is a very important. He said, if I had an hour to solve a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes thinking about the problem and 5 minutes thinking about the solution. So in other words, so first foundation of a design thinking is that there is a problem and then there is a solution. Both of them should be given equal importance. So in other words, before going to the solution, spend as much time as possible on the problem itself, just researching on the problem, thinking about the problem, various aspects of the problem. At that particular stage, don't even bring any solution in your mind, or don't even think about solution. That means when you are actually researching on a problem, you are not even thinking or even distantly trying to look at what could be a possible solution to this problem. So separating the design, the problem and the solution is a very integral step in almost all design thinking aspects. Now, what happens is, what kind of research can be done on this problem? For example, I'm not going in a very details, but I'll give you some representative maybe questions which can be asked. And you will also see that finding little bit answers to these questions, which are related to problem itself, can take solution in a very different direction. That may be one of the very interesting. For example, I would like to know how big is this problem, because just because somebody suggested, I may not jump. Probably I would look at how serious or how many people actually do. What is the percentage of people who actually conceal this thing? If it is a very small percentage, then you would probably even like to think whether I should even attempt this problem or not. And probably what is the people who do not adhere to this thing, which is probably a more important data. And if in any way I can get this data, it would be a very valuable input for my entire process of finding a solution. And I would also like to know, okay, is this problem there in at all ages, or is it more among young, or is it more among elderly? Suppose if my data says that this particular problem is more among young people and not among elderly, then probably when I sit for a solution, I also know what is the cohort of the people for whom I'm actually trying to find a solution. So if I have to do it only for elderly or only for young, solution can take a very different direction, and it gives me enough opportunity to look in that particular direction. It may be age, it could be a gender, it could be, you also like to know, is it true with people with all, maybe all types of socioeconomic conditions. So there can be multiple data which can be obtained about the problem itself when we do a research. And what are the reasons for non-compliance? Suppose if I really know, these are probably the reasons. Suppose there are 7 reasons or 10 reasons, and 80% of the people do not comply because of this one reason, then that reason becomes a very important for me compared to the other 6, 7, 8 or 9 reasons because of which. For example, some people think that I really don't need exercises. I'm okay without exercises, or people really don't find time to do. Not finding a time could be many ways. Maybe people have their own livelihood options and many other reasons for not finding a time. Or it could be simply a lethargy that you don't want to do. Or you may not be doing it because you think unless you are guided, or you have a fear that you may probably end up doing a exercise in a wrong way and probably may not end up with right benefits, or you may have a problem, or you may live in a very small place where there is no space or privacy to do these exercises, to various silly reasons, like you don't want to expose your illness to your neighbors. It could be anything. These are all representative. Don't go by this data. Now, why this data is important is, suppose if I come to know that lethargy is the most of the, let's say, is a reason in most of the cases, then it becomes slightly a behavioral design problem. So then I can look at what are the behavioral aspects which I can actually look at, kind of a thing. Suppose if it is more of fear of going wrong, then probably the solution itself takes a very different direction. So the whole idea of doing this research is that though I have not come up with any solution, but I know that this data will actually take me to the right direction of solution, because my solution is not based on imagination, but it is driven by a lot of insights, lot of data, and lot of research is this thing. So that is what when we say that first step in a design thinking is to do some research and problem, is to collect as much insights, as much data onto this particular problem. And you can have many questions. So you also want to know why were exercises prescribed. Like that's what Professor Sujata mentioned, that unless I know what is the reason why exercises were prescribed and what is the reason, solution won't be appropriate to this thing. And it may be because of non-occurrence of the same disease or a complete cure of the disease, which is not, it could be many reasons. And what is the exercise duration? For example, if the exercise duration is 3 minutes or 25 minutes or 50 minutes, so the things can be very different in terms of solution space also. If it is a quick 3-minute exercise which you need to do, you can probably do many things compared to a longer duration kind of a thing. So what is the typical time to be spent on exercise? And how many days? Is it like these exercises have to be carried for 7 days, 1 month, 3 months, or rest of the life? That also makes a huge difference in terms of what would be a solution space kind of a thing. And also you would like to do little research. Suppose if people don't do these exercises, what would be the consequence? If suppose consequence is nothing which is very serious, then probably you would again like to go back and your problem and say, should I even attempt? Because anyhow consequences of not doing is not really serious, is also one way to look at. And you would also like to see, did people attempted to solve this problem prior to me or our team? Or in that case, what was the reason for any success or failures? And you would also like to probably research on why are patients not truthful in reporting? What makes them, because that's also a very important, it may be related to a more of a psychology, but a small insight will help us to do the solution. So, and many more. So I just gave only a very few representative questions, and these questions can be populated in many more numbers, and one can look at this thing. So let me also keep going back, or I'll ask my colleagues Richa or Anchal if there are any questions which come up on the chat window. Maybe they can flag off so that we can.
Actually, yes, they, some of the participants are commenting about like developing questionnaires and stuff like that, how actually we can probe deeper into this problem, and what are the methods kind of comments.
Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful. I think that's my next slide. So if that is a question, probably I'll go into this. So there are a number of ways this research about the problem can be done. So usually we say a primary research and a secondary research, which is a very common. Secondary research means there is already a lot of information which is available on this particular problem, which I can search from the net or get it from research papers or reports, or people have even filed patents on solutions proposed for this particular problem. There are already some products and solutions which are existing in the market, which I can study, which even I can buy, or which I can even give it to certain people to try and share their experiences. So what is available is generally comes as a secondary research. So we also did, like Professor Sujata mentioned about SmartCane. So one thing which we did is, when we were developing a SmartCane, we found that we have a 4 competitors, in fact 5 competitors in the world who are actually doing a similar product. We were lucky to buy 4 of those products and give it to the users to try for a week, and basically asking their feedback, what is good and bad about these products. So when you have a 4 competitors products, and then let's say 5 people are trying each one of them and give you a data, you have already like a 20 feedbacks which are coming about existing products. If something which is everybody reports as a common problem, probably you would not like to have the same problem in your device. If all of them report something which is good in all of these, maybe that's a feature which you'd like to incorporate. So it also gives you a wealth of information through secondary research. But I think more important particularly is a primary research. So primary research can be done in a number of ways. For example, one is an immersion. Immersion is to probably live in the environment of a problem and observe and get much more insight about the problem. It could also mean putting yourselves in the shoes of the end user and experiencing the same problem to get an insight is also an immersion. Sometimes we call it as a more of a role play rather than immersion, but that's also one aspect which is mentioned here. Immersion and role play is one. Shadowing in the sense ki track some of the patients if there's an opportunity, and see what are the reasons with your own this thing why people are not complying to do that. Interviews, as somebody was mentioned, is an important aspect. You'd like to come up with a set of questions, like we just before this we said doing a research on certain aspects of a problem would be important. I'll prepare a questionnaire based on those, go to a set of users, the more the better, and get the data directly from the users, why this problem actually exists. And you would also like to probably consult with experts, for example, the physicians, physiotherapists, the people who are in this business for very many years, etc., who can give a very valuable. I'll just give an example to demonstrate, particularly for the primary research. So couple of years back, I would say about 2 years back, All India Institute of Medical Sciences came to us and said that, is there a way you can actually help us to improve the patient's experience when they come to hospitals such as AIIMS? And I don't know if anybody who has gone to a public hospital or a big government hospital, a tertiary hospital like All India Institute of Medical Sciences, etc., the experience of patients is not very pleasant. In fact, given an option, no one would like to go back again or even remotely think of going to the same place. Because the kind of traumatic experience which people go through is something which dissuades them from even attempting to go for the next time. Now, what happens is this is a very big problem. There is no direct solution. We thought, let's do immersion. Immersion in the sense that we put 3 people in one of the departments of AIIMS to spend almost a month and just observe. Go whenever OPD starts and whenever maybe the OPD ends, just stay there, keep your diary and your pen. And if you think that anything which looks not normal to you, please note down which is there. Or if you think that there is any pain point which patients experience, please note down. So these people spent almost a month, 3 of them, and there is a huge amount of data which we were able to collect, kind of a thing. If it is allowed, you would also like to probably shoot or thing. And what happens is the real life situations are very harsh. when we actually sit for solution, we often tend to think that the kind of situations for which we are trying to design solution is very ideal, but that's not true. Just to give an example, let me see if I can show you a small video which is there, which is from which came from the which actually came from the, let me just 1 minute, just give me a minute. Okay, I'm resharing my screen just to show you a small couple of seconds of video. So how would a typical environment in big hospital would look like? I think you are able to see my screen, I suppose, now.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Yeah. So this is probably how a typical OPD would look like. Let me go back to my slides. So the idea of even though this is a small, I would say, video clip, but I can easily put down about 8 to 10 pain points of patients, even from this video clip. Now, when I have people observing for many days, we get a huge amount of data which is there. So the second example which I mentioned is a shadowing. Shadowing means we ask these three people that when a patient comes to the hospital, until the time the patient leaves, why don't you be with the patient for the entire process of whatever is the diagnosis and treatment? And you shadow maybe a few dozens of people, and you can observe or you can even discuss with them, and you know that what is the kind of the process a patient goes through, and it can give you a wealth of information. The third is like a role play. The three people who were doing the primary research, we asked them, since this we were doing this for one of the department, which is ophthalmology, we said, why don't all three of you get your eyesights checked? That means you yourself are putting in the shoes of an end user to feel the same pain which you get, kind of a thing. And of course, then we had also interviewed a lot of people, the hospital administrator to many people who are on the desk, who manage, and the physicians, etc., which also gave a lot of data. And this entire immersion actually took close to about 6 months. But at the end, we had so much of data that we could feel at least that we have understood problem fairly better rather than just jumping onto a solution, which is there. So there are many ways. There are multiple sources to get this particular research done. And that's what probably... now, what happens is when you get a huge amount of data, how do I manage this data? And how do I organize this data in terms of how do I convert some of observations into insights, some of the insights into pain points and needs, and how do I really arrive at one or two problem statements becomes a very important. And sometimes you can also use a very interesting software tools which are available to manage such data which comes from the primary research and also from the secondary research. So in fact, one of the tools which we use is Miro, which is of course available freely for a certain time. But if you want to use it for longer duration, you have to buy. Aanchal, would you like to say something about Miro? Aanchal is an expert in Miro. She has trained hundreds of people in Miro.
Thank you, Professor Rao. And thank you for sharing this very comprehensive image of Miro that can be seen here. So I would just like to give a brief about Miro. So basically it is an online collaborative software, Miro, and it is very well crafted for all the stages of design thinking, as Professor Rao would be telling today in the workshop. So right from brainstorming, empathy mapping, user interviews, brainwriting, concept selection, all the stages can be very well performed in Miro. And the best thing about this is it happens real time. So you can actually collaborate with all your team members, whether it's academics or corporates, or you are individual design thinkers or innovators. All of you can come together on this specific tool and use all the inbuilt templates of Miro for your purpose. And the other thing is that, as Professor Rao mentioned, there is a free and a paid version. So in the free version, there's a restriction of the number of boards that can be used at a given time, and also on the number of members who can join at a given time. So those are some of the features. If there's any details you guys might require, you can put it on the comments and I can actually clarify that for you.
Yeah. So thanks, Aanchal. So Miro is one such tool, but there are a number of other tools. So of course, we are not selling Miro because since we use Miro, we mentioned, but there are many other tools, similar tools, which can also be used. It would be good since this is available free. You can just download and try, get a feel of what are all the things which can be done in terms of this thing. And there are wonderful training videos on YouTube, etc., which can be done. So, Richa, any questions which we have, or we can proceed?
So one of the participants has pointed out a very interesting question, that if they are working on an original problem and for which there is no existing solution,
yes,
how do they, although several of the problem identification or user empathizing processes that you have discussed in the previous slide do work on all kinds of problems, but the only part which may not be applicable for an so-called original problem, maybe they will not find any literature or existing products to compare with. The other interesting question that one person has.
So let's first take up the first question.
Yeah.
I think if that is the situation, you have a huge opportunity.
Yes.
That means, that's what I'll say. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead with the second.
Yeah. So the second one is about this using this platform example Miro. So one person is asking, how can we use such approach with limited resources? Is it about?
Yeah. So okay. Yeah. Maybe I think Aanchal can add if necessary. So it is not necessary that you have to use a software tool. You can always do it. For example, in our classes, maybe. Richa, you want to add? How do you do it in your classes?
Yeah, actually, I also didn't know about Miro before some time back, because only Aanchal introduced me to Miro. Back when, as a student and even in other design initiatives, we used to have like a big whiteboard and just post-it notes, and you can do it physically. Just put your idea on the post-it note and stick it on the whiteboard. And the whole team gathers and does it. So that's how I have done it several times. And so the end board kind of looks similar to the image that we are seeing here on Miro. The only difference I would say is that probably at the end of the meeting, we need to clean up the board. Here we can, you can save it. Other than that, I think the thing which the participant is saying, that limited, or if they can't use the software, etc., that is a very robust, I think, approach. And
But I think Aanchal also mentioned about, suppose you're working in a team and teams are distributed, correct? So, for example, you have a team of a physician, then there is somebody who is a manufacturer, and then now how do you collaborate? So in those situations, a remote collaboration tool helps kind of a better.
Yeah, and even in this times, pandemic has actually forced such tools to become even more popular, because everybody is joining meetings remotely.
Yeah. So I think what we did some time back is we did a design thinking course for about more than, I think, about 150 school teachers across the nation. And they were from almost every state of India. And we made teams like Manipur person talking to person in Tamil Nadu and Gujarat. So they could all collaborate over Miro in the pandemic. Otherwise, they could not have.
They could not.
Just an example. Okay, thanks. Okay.
And one tool, sorry. One person has mentioned another tool called KJ Diagram. And so I would say that there are several. Miro is, as Sir said, that it's just one of the tools. There are several similar online tools or softwares available. I think KJ Diagram is also a similar platform. You can use any one which you are familiar with, I think.
Yeah. So if you actually search for design thinking tools and software, you'll end up with probably numbers maybe in 3 digits, which are there. So some may be discussing only one aspect. For example, tools such as Miro can be used to do multiple things of a design thinking. Some software tools can only help you to do just one aspect of a process or something. Yeah. Okay.
So I would like to add here to this question, like as it is asked and as it was answered by Dr. Richa Gupta also. So the KJ diagram or these kind of methods, also it is also known as affinity diagram. So these actually, this is a kind of very specific process or a technique, if you can say, a method that can devise or bring you certain solutions. But Miro is an integration of all these kind of methods. So you would also find a template for affinity diagram in Miro itself. So it is just basically, if I can put it in this way, it has brought about all the very effective methods and tools that are used in design thinking, and it has integrated it in a very simplistic, user-friendly manner. And I'm sure you will be able to find all these specific method templates in many other tools also, including Miro.
Okay, thanks, Aanchal. I think we'll probably proceed and take a few more questions later. Is that okay? Yeah. So what happens because of your lot of this primary and secondary research is that you're able to get a lot of insights, experience yourself to some extent about the problem. It gives you also enough opportunity to define the problem precisely, which is a very important aspect in design thinking. Just to give, for example, let's say I want to define a problem, which is basically, let's say I'm working in an area, how to reduce fall risks in elderly. Okay. And all of us know that almost every country had a large number of falls, and it is one of the major problems which is still unsolved to do this. Now, if I want to address this problem of fall risks in elderly, I can actually, based on my research which I have done, I can make my problem statement in very different directions. Just to give an example, I may concentrate on probably putting a problem as how to prevent the falls. So when I say my design statement or design brief is only to prevent a fall, I'm actually not looking at other aspects, what happens after the fall. My entire concentration is on preventing the falls. Or somebody can say, I don't want to prevent the fall, but I want to reduce the probability of fall. And solutions can be very different in these two directions. Or reducing injuries due to fall. So there are products and solutions which look at preventing the falls, but there are also products and solutions which are just, which does not prevent the fall, but reduce the injuries when the fall occurs. Or there are things like how to detect the falls. So what happens is, when I do a research, I also come to know which of these aspects probably requires a real, I would say, importance. And you can probably also make your problem crisper. If I want to take a broader aspect, how to reduce fall risks elderly, then you may have to address all aspects of this problem. Then it becomes a much broader umbrella. Whether you want to do that or you want to target a very specific aspect of a problem is an important. Another thing which is also the data and the research tells you is what to include and what to exclude when you define a problem. To give an example, let's say, should I also include falls which happen from bed, or I shouldn't? Because if I include, maybe my solutions require that also to be covered. And should I also look at falls from stairs, or falls happening only indoor or outdoor or both, or falls which are happening, let's say, in a specific location. Now this, how do you define a problem and what you want to include and exclude becomes a more crisper with this data. And data gives you where you have a high probability of success in terms of defining a problem. This is just to give a pictorial view of inclusion. And imagine that each of these dots is the persons whom you have interviewed for the time being, and you got a lot of insights. Now, if I want to, and there can be, if I want to basically look at all their needs, then I also need to see what is the circle which I want to cover. If I take the bigger circle, then of course I have to do a lot of work and I may have to come up with multiple things to address that. But maybe I'll take a one smaller circle which probably covers most of them, or this blue circle. If I end up taking a red circle based on my imagination, not from the data, because data is not supporting, you may end up serving a very small population also, which is an important. So in other words, each of these persons whom you interviewed or from whom the insights came also tells where the criticality of the problem lie and how the problem should be defined. And we had number of cases, particularly since we work in medical and assistive domains. Most of my examples may be from the medical. Like in one of the examples is, if I say my need statement is, I want to develop an infection-free catheter, then that's one domain. But when I go and do immersion and look at, probably I may think that there is a more need for infection-free urinary catheter. That's where most of the infections occur, and let me concentrate only on that aspect. Or you may say that this often happens in an ICU, so my need statement should be an infection-free urinary catheter for ICU patients. So it also kind of becomes crisper or broader. Now there is both pros and cons. If you take a more crisp problem, you can come up with a solution, test, and develop it quickly. If you take a broader problem, then you also need to just take this example. If I take this bigger circle as my problem, when I come up with a solution, I have to go back to a much larger cohort of the people to test my solution, which is also an important. if I take a specific, let's say a problem area or a very crisp kind of a thing, then your this thing also reduces. But it also has a serious implications in terms of your business and market, which is also an important. So as you are going for more crisper and more, let's say you're trying to exclude many, you're also trying to shrink the market or shrink the impact which you can make with the user. So it's but the whole idea is key, the data drives you, or the research actually helps you to make decisions in a much better way rather than more based on imagination, etc. Okay, so the step 3. So up to this problem, what we looked at is the first 2 steps, which are related to how do you actually identify a need and validate a need. So there could be 2 situations. You want to work on a problem which you have not defined, and you want to use this entire process to come up with a new need which you want to address. That was the case when we did it with patients' experience. So when we actually came up with the pain points, we ended up with more than 50 pain points for the patients. But we only picked 3 of those which are most important, and we said we will only do the solution for those 3. What are those? One is that sitting space for the people, which is an important aspect. And second thing is, how do people actually, how do you reduce the waiting time for the people, which is a very important. The third aspect is, how do you are able to locate a specific place where you have to go for a treatment or a registration, that is what we call as a wayfinding. And we said we'll only take up these 3 and we will ignore all the other, because it's a too big a problem to solve. And a lot of our data gave, and now we have implemented those 3 solutions in All India Institute of Medical Sciences. Okay, any questions before, or I can go to step 3?
So this Vivek Sarda says, it's actually here in the chat box, that Professor Rao mentioned that the team of 3 people worked for 6 months to come up with insights on the problem, and generally startups in the initial stage would not be able to afford this.
Yeah.
Any suggestions on that?
True. So how much research to be done depends largely on that. Suppose I may use a design thinking approach to solve my own academic problem, 1 semester project work. Then I'll go to a certain depth. But if I'm, let's say, a consultant trying to provide a solution to others, or I may go to another depth. If I am a startup, probably I'll do more. And so it is true. The idea is, but what is generally seen is that even if you spend little more time on research, it actually helps in the long run. What is generally seen is there is a direct correlation between how well you understood the problem and how many iterations you did later to succeed. If you don't do a good research, you can actually start with 1 solution, which may or may not succeed. But even if you succeed, you end up doing many, I would say, iterations of the product to incorporate all those problems about which you did not know, which would have come through your research. So it's a trade-off, whether I want to spend more time on researching or I want to spend more time on iterating, because iterations are also difficult. Every time a new iteration means a new design, a new prototyping, then there is a new trial and testing, and then again go back to the bench for redesign. So that's also a very expensive process.
Yes, I would like to add to what Professor Rao said, that in the design thinking, as we will proceed with the steps, the final step, which is like collecting feedback. So if somebody, a design team is actually not understanding the problem very well in the initial phase, they might get extensive critique or feedback in the last stage. And that will be actually even more time taking and costlier for the team to incorporate. So if you have those feedback or ideas or inputs from your target user in the beginning itself, you can build your design based on those inputs.
Yeah, just to add to what Richa has said, there are a number of examples where startups have picked a need which actually did not exist. And people came to know only after going through the entire process, because that validation of that need was not done in the research. You probably went ahead and even put the product in a market. When you come to know that your product is not selling, then you realize that actually the need never existed, or probably need could have been reiterated in a very different way. It happens many times. And I think if some of the startups do that mistake, we don't consider it as anything wrong, because it's also a part of a learning process. And in fact, that means that those are the failures for the startups. And failures are extremely valuable in a startup ecosystem. I know some of the investors who will not invest money in those startups which have not failed a few times, or those entrepreneurs who have not failed earlier. Okay, so let me continue. Maybe we'll again pause for this thing. So now we come to the solution space, having defined the problem very well. So how do we probably end up with multiple solutions is this thing. That's another little training problem which we have, particularly from our engineering education, that whenever a problem is given to us, we always end up with one solution, because we are trained in that particular direction. But a problem can have a multiple solution in multiple directions. Initially, we don't know which one will actually work. So when I sit for ideation, or when I sit for exploring the solution, I won't look at the success failure criteria of the problem. I'll just put as many possible solutions which I can come up, and just put it there. It may be a very radical way of this thing. Take the problem which we had. For example, the physician wants to know. So let's say a physician hospital would like to depute a person who will actually go to the patient's house and take a note of whether the exercise has done, or the patient is supposed to inform when the exercises are done and somebody is coming and probably taking an attendance. Now that maybe somebody can say, hey, how can you have a solution which is not very practical? But in design thinking, you don't delete that solution immediately. You'll still keep it in the database at an ideation stage, and I would still keep it, because every solution may have a goodness, and later you'll see that goodness of multiple solutions can be combined to arrive at a even better solution than any one of those. So because you want to explore solution space as large as possible. So in fact, people are asked to come up with 50, 100 solutions to start sometimes for problems such as this. Okay, now one is, of course, you can get a brainstorm to get multiple solutions. And when you are actually coming up with a solution, you also have to have a feel or a pulse of the research which has gone. And that's an important aspect. It comes to your basically help in doing that. And there are multiple ideation techniques to get more solutions. If people may probably say that I can come up with 3 solutions, 4 solutions, but I cannot come up with 50 solutions. The design thinking also proposes there are methods to multiply the solutions using a different methods. I'll just mention maybe 2 techniques. There are more techniques which you can look. For example, there is something which is called as 635 brain writing. And if you just say 635, probably you will end up with a Wikipedia page of a 635 or something. And what it says that suppose there are 6 people who are trying to find a solution, and each of them actually comes up with 3 solutions, which is probably very practical to do. Then what happens is each of the member would take each of the solutions of the other and probably modify it to make it work, which is there. Suppose if you think that it works, it's fine, but how to improve it, or what modifications can be done so that the solution can be improved. Now, if you look at 6 into 3 into probably another 6, then you end up with like 108 solutions, even though one person is only coming up with 3 solutions. And that is where you can also use tools, again, come back to Miro, which can help you to do this brainwriting sessions very effectively. So you have like probably 7 windows. In one window, you have all the initial solutions. Then in the subsequent windows, you have modified solutions, and you can look at that. There is another very popular technique these days, which is called as Camper, where each of the characters stands for a very different thing. For example, S stands for a substitute. Now, substitute says ki take an existing solution and just substitute maybe a key feature with another one to see what happens. For example, my solution has, let's say, ultrasonic sensor. So if you use a S, you would like to think what happens if I use infrared sensor instead of an ultrasonic sensor. Maybe it's also little more systematic way of going towards out-of-box solutions, you can say. But there are multiple such techniques which are available. I'll not go into detail because these have to be explored. And I think the best value comes only when you experience through applying it to a problem. And suppose if I have a large number of solutions which I arrive by any of these techniques, ideally I would like to apply only probably one solution will go through. And it's like a funnel. I have 100 plus solution. Now I start eliminating by applying a filters. Of course, the major filters which are used in design thinking is desirability and feasibility and viability. So desirability more comes from the user side, which is a lot of aspects. Feasibility more comes from the, you can say, technical feasibility or manufacturing feasibility, various aspects. Viability comes more from the business and finance aspect of that. So even if I apply just these 3 filters, maybe I see that large number of them get eliminated, and the solutions which actually fall into sweet spot, maybe a smaller number, could be a first quick elimination. This may not be the elimination technique, but this is like you can do that. And there could be multiple, just like you had a questions for your research, you can also have large number of questions as a filters to do that. Will users accept my solution? Now, what gives me a confidence to say whether users accept my solution is based on my earlier research. Since I understood the users well during my empathy stage, that is research stage, so I have some confidence whether users will accept or may not accept a particular solution which I have come up. You can put many things. I'm just again showing few representative. Is it easy to use? Sometimes we do a lot of user-centered approach and look at user as a primary person, but any solution has multiple stakeholders, which are very, very important. We have number of examples where users were happy, but the people who matter for these products did not. I'll just give an example. One of our groups actually came up with a solution to a problem of patients. So there is a process which is called colonoscopy. Some of you may have heard of or even gone through. So it's a very painful process. So students spent almost 6 months, a group of 4, and came up with a solution. They said this is less painful for the patients. There is a new concept. When they took it to the doctor said, who told you that pain is a problem for us or a patient? So doctor thought that pain is not at all an issue. It may be an issue for a patient, but for a doctor, it's not an issue. If doctor thinks that pain is not an issue, they're not going to prescribe your solution. So since you did not consult the doctor in the earlier stages, so your solution is a failure because you are only looking from the patient perspective. So there are a number of such examples where we ignored one stakeholder. Even Professor Sujata mentioned about SmartCane. One of the earlier versions which we came did not go well with people who train blind people on the SmartCane. They said, your product is wonderful, but it is very difficult to train people on your device. Please go back and probably do something. So we had to do one iteration to take care of just the trainer's perspective. So there are a number of such very interesting cases which are there. You would like to apply prototyping and manufacturability. You would like to see whether I do have any value proposition by this new solution because there are already people in the market. Affordability, you would like to see what is the market size, or can my solution be used without much of physical or a cognitive effort, or does it demand too much of that? I'm just throwing few random questions, and if you have a checklist which is a much bigger, it will always help you. And this checklist can also be prepared, which sometimes is a domain specific. I work in a certain domain, so I can also prepare this. Will this work in all environment? Sometimes a solution to a problem may lead to a completely new problem which was not anticipated. You would like to apply those filter. You would like to look at safety or even social stigma which is associated with the solution. Or does it require considerable training, as I mentioned? Is it your product easy to maintain? Does it have high running costs? So filters can be many. Now, why these filters are important is if I have a larger solution and if I have a larger filters, the solution which goes through most of the filters or all of the filters has a very high probability of success because you have eliminated most of the reasons for failure at this stage itself without even going for, let's say, first prototype or so. And you can also organize some of these solutions in the form of what we call as a mind mapping. One category, for example, like 3 category of solutions which came. Let's say one category of solution was based on camera. The second one was based on, let's say, gamification. And the third category. And then there are sub-solutions of that. If I find that gamification is not going to work, then I can eliminate the complete tree, which are solutions which fall into gamification. And I'll not consider because gamification did not go through a viability filter or other filters which are kind of. And you can also have, some of these tools are available, which probably you can browse through on the net. Net is very rich in terms of design thinking kind of a thing. For example, I would like to organize my solutions as easy, difficult, innovative, and I know which space to target and which space to eliminate is kind of a thing. Even people can do the way we do in engineering sometimes, that you have multiple solutions and then there are filters. These filters have a weightages. You rank them as 1 to 5 and get a composite score and say that solution 4 is probably most as the highest value and I would like to take it forward kind of a thing. So any questions before that? I have only a couple of more slides. Maybe.
Yeah, we actually don't have any content related questions. Just one question was whether the slides will be available.
Yes, slides you can. I think video will be available and slides will also can be made available.
Yeah, we do not have any other questions.
Okay. I don't know. People can also keep posting the questions in chat window because it's not truly a dialogue, but we will try to take up it. Anybody would like to ask the question? Maybe Vivek or somebody.
Yeah.
Hi, Prof. I think the idea is great. A lot of these concepts would be really beneficial. Can you suggest some more resources for us to dive deeper after this lecture?
Okay, so we can do that. So one thing is there are net has a lot of resources which we can point out. The second thing is that there are also longer courses on design thinking. I think all of us have an access to MOOC courses, correct? And the MOOC courses, which are run by various agencies, cover some of these courses very well. And some of them are free. Maybe a couple of them may be paid courses, which are there. One can look at that. There is enough resources. So we'll tell some more resources after the lecture, or we can email you, which you can probably pass it on to others. Okay, so shall I proceed? Then?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So now that we have actually started with a large number of solutions and converge to, sometimes you can converge to one, or you can even keep small set of solution rather than one final solutions, which is there. I have also seen many of the organizations, let's say, even when they go for prototyping, trying 3 different versions of a solutions as a prototype, which we may not do all the time, but if there is a possibility, we can do. For example, in digital world, these are easy to do. Suppose if I'm coming up with a solution, which is, let's say, I want to use a design thinking to design a logo of a company. So I propose to the company, these are the 3 possible logos which are there, instead of just saying that this is the logo for you, kind of a thing. Or it could be any, I'm just looking at a visual communication also as a product. So again, like when you have a smaller set of solution or one solution you'd like to validate. So again, it could be through not only brainstorming, which is a continuous process, but you would like to go back to the user. And if you also look at the design thinking process, there is a co-creation is a inbuilt in that. In other words, users and stakeholders are a very integral part of both your identification of a solution as well as identification of a solution. If they are part of your solution throughout your journey, it actually makes more sense and less iterations to do. And you'd like to probably take experts' opinion and prototypes. Often when we say in engineering, the prototypes are functional prototypes, but it's also possible that at early stages, one can do a lot of look-alike, work-alike prototypes and take it to users, which are very easy to make. In case users reject, let's say, one type of a solution, then you don't want to explore that and really build a functional prototype of those kind of a thing. And of course, lab testing and user testing is an integral part of it. But the very essence of design thinking is what is shown at the bottom, that it's an iterative process. So design, build, test, fail, and modify. The belief is also that nobody has ever come up with first version of a product which actually succeeded in all aspects and made a big impact. So somewhere it goes through iterations, either a small or a larger modification, before you say that the product has been refined number of times and has been validated for in all aspects to be successful kind of it. So now these, whatever we discussed is also put it as a framework. For example, the entire Europe calls this design thinking process as a double diamond process. So if you look at the left diamond, this is to define the problem, and the right diamond is to create a solution. So first thing is to understand the problem, which is first half of the diamond. Second is a define, which is the second half of the first diamond. And when you are at the middle, you clearly have a problem which is very well defined, and then you explore the solution, which is the second aspect, the third aspect, and fourth is to create a solution, which is like prototyping. And you also see the iterative aspect of learn, build, measure, refinement of a product, which goes through. If you also look at this particular process, first and third processes are diverging in nature, and the second and fourth are converging. So you do enough research, depending on how much time, efforts, or energy and money which you have. And when you are actually trying to do a divergent phase of a research, you try to find out whatever details which are available. For example, if I'm going to a user, I would also like to probably ask how much do they earn, what is their like monthly family income. Now somebody can say, is that directly related to a product which you are trying to do, a medical, etc. It's in many ways, because it also tells me what is the kind of buying or a paying power which people have for whom I am actually trying to build. In fact, there is a very interesting example is when there was a product which was to be built for people who are vegetable vendors, and the product was actually coming out as a cost as a 800 rupees, 600 to 800 rupees as a cost. It was realized that many of them will not have a 600 or 800 saving to buy this particular product, because the moment they have some earning, they have more requirements, they will actually spend it. So how can you sell 800 rupee product to a vegetable vendor who will probably may not have 800 rupees as a savings? But when you actually know about this particular user more, you also come to know that they can't have 800 rupees as a saving, but they can have 20 rupees saving per day. That's possible. Now, since you know that the person can save 20 rupees per day, you would like to position your product in a very different way, either as a product or a service. Should it be sold or should it be rented? Should it be sold in one time, or should there be an EMI on this particular product? So all the business aspects, which also comes from your research, because you understood this person very well. And that is why the divergent phase is to get as much information as possible. Whenever you have a convergent phase, you come to very specific, based on the information collected, to a specific problem. And then last converging is to a specific solution. And the same thing which is put as all of you may have seen this as a figure in a design thinking, which is a 5-step process. Empathy is to empathize with users and stakeholders to correct. Then you define the problem. Ideation is to come up with concepts. Then to filter and prototype and test is another. So these are the two common models which are used worldwide as a framework for a design thinking. Okay, there are modifications of these models which are also available.
So there is a question which probably relates to the design thinking process.
Okay.
Sorry,
so I think my slides are also over, so we can take the questions.
Okay. So So this is pertaining to the SmartCane device, and the person wants to know which aspect of the design thinking process really helped in the development, and if you would highlight one or two points in the journey on the entire process that were like game changing, what would be them?
Yeah. So that's a very important question. So what I'll do is I'll probably mention one of them, but also there is a 90 minutes video on which kind of covers the design thinking aspect of a SmartCane. I'll just share it, or Vivek already has. Vivek can share it with the people after this particular thing. Just to give an example, when we did our first functional prototype with we went to test the prototype with 30 users, which are there. And when we went to users, the prototypes were 3D printed, and they were all, of course, the white filament was used, and then we took them and said, okay, this is like a final product for you to test, kind of a thing. So people asked, what is the color of your product? Now, sometimes you may think that for visually challenged people, color is not an important aspect, which is very important. Then we came to know that everybody, almost all of them, have a specific color choice which they want. Okay, sometimes sitting in a laboratory, it's very difficult to know, but you come to know. And then we had to take another survey on what are the possible colors and incorporate new colors into the SmartCane to meet their needs, kind of a thing. So that's like when you thought white is a default color and took it, that was your failure, because you did not understand the person's aspirations, correct, which is there. And if you, many times, like, of course, one of the students who went to do the trials by mistake asked, how does the color matter to you? Which is a very wrong question to ask. But people also replied in a very, I would say, arrogant manner, saying that whenever you buy anything, let's say a garment or something, it's not just that you like it, but you also want to show it to others. So because I think particularly it happens with this thing. Whenever we buy something, we say, how do I look in this particular aspect is more important also. And I think the same was this thing. So there are a number of examples such as these, which is given in that 90 minutes video. And you'll probably get those.
Another interesting question which has been posed is the implementation of design thinking approach. How, like, what are the challenges or barriers when somebody is trying to use it in practice in product development?
Yeah, virtually there are no major challenges. See, good thing about design thinking is it's actually also a set of principles and tools how you do it. And good thing is, even if you take bits and pieces, it still adds a value to your process. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that is the beauty of this thing. There is nothing like a very algorithmic process. If you violate one of the steps, you don't get the entire value. Somebody may just use the research stage very well, or somebody may do very well the solution finding space very well, but the benefits are still there. So you don't have to really, there is no risk in trying out.
Yeah. Actually, for that matter, I think this is the same person who asked about using design thinking in startup scenario. Yeah. So actually, there are several startups who in the beginning, when they actually started the company or their idea, they did not know about design thinking. And actually, in the middle of their product development or sometimes even product dissemination, when they came across several failures or barriers, they started using that some parts or aspects of the design thinking process. So in that terms, I think as I said, it is pretty flexible, and so, and it is more like a way of like imbibing it in a problem solving thinking. Yeah,
true, very true. Yeah.
And actually on that line, the person asked like if there are suggestions how we can use this approach and practice it in daily decision making. So
you can do that
definitely.
Yeah. So it becomes I think once you start practicing. And another thing is that though we did it as a lecture, the real value of design thinking comes through only practice. So whenever we do a design thinking course, we do it as a DIY mode. So do it yourself.
Yeah.
But of course, that requires many more days to do that. Yeah. But this thing, in fact, people have tried design thinking for as simple a problem to find a right gift for a party to a problem such as how to clear the debris in space. As big a problem as.
Yes. Yes. Another interesting question that we have here is it isn't always possible to arrive at the perfect solution for a problem. Can you please present your experiences on how to balance between the key objectives and achieve practical solutions? So, yeah.
That's...
So I think the word if I may, so the objective of using the design thinking process is not to actually achieve or arrive at a perfect solution, but rather, as we say, the optimal solution or the most viable or the most desirable from the user's point of view. So the definition of perfect may not be suitable here. So when you say the practical solution, that means we are talking about a feasibility or the other implementation related filters. So all those are already part of the design thinking process, and I think what the person is trying to ask is how we know when to stop. I think that is what the person wants to know.
Yeah, it also comes through your gut feeling.
Yes.
To some extent, and experience, which is there. So there are, as I said, this is more of experiential. The more I experience, the better I am at it, kind of a thing. There is you can still go wrong, but in spite of many years of your experience, it is not necessary that. Only thing which we have seen is that if you practice it more seriously, the evidence which we have is that the number of iterations which will arrive, which you will take to arrive at a solution which you can call it as a successful solution reduces. That is a metric.
One person has posed a set of 2-3 questions and wants to know about the workshop which was conducted with 150 school teachers, and how do you think design thinking can be incorporated in schools?
Oh, okay. So that's an interesting. So why we did it is Niti Aayog wanted us to do it. Now, the way that workshop was conducted was we introduce certain concept, for example, understanding the users, etc. And then we leave the teams to actually do that themselves and come back to us after like 4 days or a week to share their experiences. And then we do that. For example, all the steps which we described, people did it themselves rather than just listening to us. So the lecture was always followed by trying out on their own and then coming back and doing it. And sometimes it also requires a little guidance. So what we did is we also had about 10 to 12 mentors. So every mentor took care of 2 to 3 groups, guiding them throughout this month for the process to do that. Because we thought for school teachers and others it may be required. And that's how it became a very effective process. And almost everybody who finished the course was very happy. In fact, I don't know, Aanchal has all the videos, pitches which are prepared by them. Maybe we can share 1 or 2 of them to show what comes out at the end of a design training.
Right, sir. So would be sharing it afterwards, or do you?
Yeah, afterwards. Afterwards, you can send it to Vivek, a couple of them, and they can have. And how to introduce in schools is a big one. There are not enough hands. There are millions of people waiting to learn. After we did that particular course with Niti Aayog, CBSE is asking us to do it for all school teachers and kids in the entire country. Gujarat government wants their 2 lakh plus higher education students to be trained. And AICTE wants it to be introduced in all 10,000 engineering colleges. But we don't have a bandwidth. We are still thinking how to do it. But if there are some champions who want to take up this work, there is an opportunity.
So I would also like to add about that experience, as the person has asked that if there were any problems in that workshop or which needed to be addressed. So I would like to say that the teachers were surprisingly very enthusiastic about the whole course and to understand the process. And even though we were doing it amidst a pandemic, the expectations were definitely crossed by them. And another thing is that most of the teachers, ATL in charges, even though they were not thorough with the hardcore prototyping skills, mechanical skills, but all of them actually tried their best, and most of them actually came up with software-based prototypes. So that was interesting. Apart from that, I don't think there was any other challenge that we faced.
So just to add, somebody also asked what are the challenges in design thinking. One of the major challenges is the already reinforcement which has happened. Because if people are trained to come up with quickly an answer or a solution and always start with one solution. So that is actually kind of reinforced in our training. Sometimes getting out of that takes some time. We still jump to the solution when it is given without researching on the problem, or we may end up with a single solution. That could be a challenge for people. But yeah, once people realize the value of doing that, it becomes a new reinforcement.
So Brijmohan is actually suggesting.
I think let's also keep a time probably.
Space.
Is that we are okay?
Yeah.
But I think organizer should be okay.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Okay, take this question since you.
Go ahead and take this question, Richa.
Yeah. The last one, I think, and it's more like a suggestion, and I think Professor Rao can elaborate because it's already being put into force. He's talking about we need to work extensively on introducing tinkering spaces in India.
Yeah, Good question and a good suggestion. So what happened is when Niti Aayog created these tinkering labs, the idea was to bring the making culture. Okay, and I think now they realize that making culture has come in at least those schools where the labs are there. Now they want to take it to the next level and introduce the design thinking, which is there. So in making culture, what was happening is they were given certain components and what they are expected to build, which is there. The other aspect of what need to address, the creative aspect was not coming. Now I think it is done. In fact, our pilot was a first one in that direction, which we did it just to introduce the design thinking apart from the making culture of that. But you are also right that only a few schools have a tinkering, but many more schools would probably will have in future. Okay, so I think that probably brings us to the end of this session.
Thank you very much for a very informative and enjoyable session. I think, like you said, a workshop like this in person would be fantastic. But hats off to you for making it interactive and holding attention for nearly an hour and a half, even in the online mode. So I think that's quite an achievement. So thank you very much. I just thought I'll capture some of the key learnings from this session. I think, especially for startups also, I think the key is defining the problem properly. The time spent on defining the problem is well worth the rewards later. And to do it, using research versus imagination. Because as engineers, many times we get drawn to certain technologies and we want to build a solution around the technology without really knowing what problem we are solving. That's something that we see quite often sitting in our sitting at our desks or in our labs, and instead of that, trying to develop empathy for the potential user, understand what it is, who are all the stakeholders involved in the decision making, because the product is not just about the end user who's going to pay for it. Is it going to be a caregiver? Is it going to be someone else? Or like Professor Rao mentioned in his endoscopy example, if the doctor doesn't buy in, then you're not looking at the right customer, for your product. I think some other in the process, being open-minded about multiple solutions. As I like to say to my students, don't get married to the first solution you come across. You have to explore different things, and you have to be able to do brainstorming initially without being judgmental. I think that's important. So for more and more ideas to come out so that you can extract the best features from every idea to create your optimal solution. I also think it's very important, to not forget about the aspirational aspect of a product to the user. And it's not just enough to be functional, but it has to be aspirational. So I think the whole process, it was very eye-opening, and it's nice to see so many tools are out there, but I guess design thinking can be thought of as, including vegetables in a diet. You can, even if you include a few, you'll still benefit. Don't not include it at all. So I hope, the viewers all benefited from this one. And we hope to see many great products coming out of using this approach. Thank you so much, Professor Rao, Richa, and Aanchal, for a very enlightening session. Thank you from R2D2 team and on behalf of all the viewers of the Samsung workshop will be watched by many others. We'll be posting the recording. So hopefully many more will benefit than the ones who are able to join us today. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the opportunity. Thanks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sujata.